everyone, welcome back to Artist Banter, a show where we delve into the vast and unique professional world of artists. Learn about artist stories, their professional careers, and the interesting work that they create. Today, I'm joined by Maxim Adams, a music producer and concert mixer for the Troubadour Music Venue in Los Angeles, Aviator Nation Dreamland in Malibu, and an outdoor venue in Los Angeles called Grand Performances. Super cool stuff. So welcome, Maxim. I'm personally so excited to get to interview you today. It's been a long time coming to get all of this together. I first met you at an Ashes to Amber concert at the Aviator Nation Dreamland, and it was so awesome getting to see you mix, and the concert was wonderful. So I've loved watching all your behind scenes on Instagram and listening to the music you put together. So long story short, I'm really thrilled to get to know more about your profession and your day-to-day work life.
Well, thanks for having me, Alex. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. So, for the audience, what is it that you exactly do for work, or what's your job title?
So technically, my job title is audio engineer or front of house. I basically take care of a lot of the technically behind the scenes of a concert and the way that the audience perceives the sound coming out of the speakers, and as well as the sound that the artist is also experiencing. So I'm kind of in charge of curating the textures and the sonics of what a band sounds like live and what the audience is going to hear when they come out to a show.
That's so rad. Because when you go to a concert, you're kind of just like, you just think automatically it's going to be the bands or whoever's playing. But there's actually a lot of the behind the scenes that happens where, you need to make it sound good. It's not just going to sound good all on its own. So yeah. That's really cool that we're going to meet someone who does all that today. So, what's like a typical day of work for you since you go to these concerts, or do you do that behind the scenes work?
Yeah, so a typical day looks like I basically show up around maybe 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. That's usually our call time. We get there before the bands because we have a little bit of setup to do before they get there. And then hopefully we're all set up on our end before the band shows up. Band shows up maybe an hour later. They load in, and then we do sound check. So sound check is where we're getting the levels right. We're meeting the artist. We're kind of getting comfortable, getting the sound, kind of texturally, coherent inside of the room, because every room is different. So every room requires different things, and every band is different. So every band, requires different EQs, different compression style, so just getting the sound check as close as possible, which actually a lot of people don't know, but the sound check sometimes in a closed room changes once people are inside. So you kind of have to eyeball kind of how it's going to sound also when people show up. So we kind of get sound check, figured out, and then we break usually for dinner, and then doors open, people show up, the vibes get right. We put on some house music to get everyone kind of bubbling. And then, usually the opener goes on, main support to warm up the night. And then the headliner will show up and get everybody rocking. So, it's a full day, and then after the band goes, we'll usually clean up, post show. And no, it's a long day, but it's super fulfilling, especially when the audience is vibing. The band comes off high as a kite because they're like, oh my God, it sounded so good, and obviously I'm, feeling great when everyone's, feeling great. So, yeah, that's kind of like a normal day in the life, sometimes in between, the sound check and doors, I'll try and work on some other things on my laptop, because I am a producer as well, a music producer. I make music, I release music. As an artist, I play in a band, shout out Deep Fried Dynamite. So there's, I feel like I'm constantly being creative. I'm constantly, trying to stay in that groove of being musical, being creative, and mixing live music is a very creative art as well, using effects. And also, I think a lot of basic tools like compression, like EQ, like volume, gain structure, that all is that can be also taken as a creative liberty, an artistic choice. The way that you use these tools, these basic tools, kind of sets your sound apart from someone else's sound, So I've been just trying to work on curating my sound. So when people show up and they know that I'm mixing, they already know that they're getting ready to have a really fun show. So to get lost in.
I absolutely love that. And I had no idea that, there's different, like at a concert, different mixers have their own different sounds and the levels and stuff. So that's really interesting. I had absolutely no idea. But for like the listeners as well, what's another thing that, when somebody goes to a concert or somebody listens to music that they would never know actually goes on behind the scenes that you do?
I like to say, and a lot of people would like recognize me saying this, is that if nobody knows that I was there, I did my job right. If everyone can be so lost in the performance that they don't notice any issues with audio, they don't notice, they're just completely engulfed in the experience of the venue, of the sound, the way it looks, all that stuff. I did my job right. It's always the times when people notice something or whatever where, that's when you're like, everyone turns their head, and it's like, oh, what's going on? Are they fixing it or whatever? But I try my best to, mitigate those kinds of problems so people can just stay in that dreamlike state during the concert. A lot of things that happen during the show that maybe people don't really realize is the band and I are communicating a lot throughout the show while they're playing. So, maybe they need adjustments in what they're hearing on stage. Maybe, they, a lot of times it's volume adjustments, whether they want more of something, less of something. So, but at a certain point, you can get it dialed in to where they're also getting lost in the same way the audience is getting lost. So like light communication with the band maybe. And also, I don't know, just watching, watching the show myself, I'm enjoying it too. I feel like there's this synergy between the front of house person or anyone who's working on the production, the band and the audience, it's kind of the trifecta where if everyone is just in this really nice place where they're forgetting that there's technical aspects of the show going on, we're all just having a good time and we get to the end. There's a lot of shows where I get to the end and I go, man, this is why I do it. Because
absolutely wonderful.
Because I forget that, there was setup or tear down or there's work or, technical aspects of it. When I myself get lost, in the band's songs, the band's music, the way it's coming at the audience, the way it's being presented to the room, it's magic. You can't recreate that sometimes in a studio, and I think we try to as much as we can recreate that magic in the studio, but there's nothing like huge subs, beating against your body. There's nothing like being around hundreds of people, thousands of people, experiencing that same rhythmic, value. It's just some type of magic that you can't get anywhere else.
I absolutely agree with you. Concerts are some of my favorite things to go to because of that magic that you feel when you see the live music and you're with other people who also love the same music as you. You're dancing. It's absolutely a wonderful time. So, like you said before, you sometimes end these concerts feeling like you have the best job in the world. And I would agree with myself, and I bet a lot of listeners too. You have the dream job that you get to go to these concerts and have a great time and you get to be creative and all that stuff. But, like for students who are trying to get into that line of work or, maybe get into the music industry, did you know that you were always going to get into this line of work, or how did that process go?
I think that because I was a musician first, I think a lot of audio, visual AV people start either as a musician or being a lover of music or something like that. So for me, my journey started as being a guitar player, being a musician, playing in my band, things like that. And I think everyone's first dream is to be a rock star. I think that's like where baseline it starts, and then I think as I got older, I I start to get thrown into certain situations where, because I was playing music all the time, because I understood things like signal flow, how, gear, works, how musicians work, understanding all of that, I got put in positions where all of a sudden I was at kind of like lower level open mics, lower level venues, underground places where I was like, I could make it sound better than the person who's currently doing this right now, because I'd go to shows or I'd play shows and I was experiencing like not the feeling that I was just describing, like being distracted or not really getting lost in it or things like that. And so I slowly started to like slip into these opportunities where I was either behind the console now, it really started. My first audio gig was at an open mic outside, low pressure, a local spot that I was playing at, and then it just kind of turned into like, well, I'd like to help. It started as wanting to help and create a better experience. And then as soon as I realized that, like, whoa, like, I feel like I love this feeling of being able to make it sound the way that I'm imagining it sounding, or like, and that's a artist's disease, right? We always imagine that we can like make it sound the way that we hear it in our head. So that's kind of like where it started for me. I just started doing these kind of like lower level gigs, just starting to kind of move through the audio scene and also being okay with it. I think my dream turned into like, okay, now I want to like be a sound guy, do audio, but like first and foremost, I want to also be able to have the freedom to make my music whenever I want. So, the audio started to pay for my free time of being in my own studio. It started paying for new gear that I wanted to add to the studio to make my music better. So it was always this balance of like, I'm producing a lot of people in the studio, I'm producing my own music, all these things, but like, I'm also for work, like doing the audio side of things, the more technical side of things. And that kind of, it was always about how can I give myself the freedom to make my music better, to have the freedom to make my music, and how can I allow myself to not have to leave that flow state of doing something creative. Because there was a time where I was doing like audio gigs on the weekends, and then I worked at like Jamba Juice for like a little bit. And this is like when I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I just got my license, I'm doing these things. And then it turned into like maybe other things. I worked in a bunch of different jobs. I've worked on TV sets. I've worked at a car place. I've worked, in the food industry. I've worked literally like, across the board. And it was just kind of supplemental because, audio was a weekend gig. It was like, kind of a part-time thing. And then it kind of all changed when I honestly just kind of got sick of doing the stuff. Cause what I was describing just now about staying in that flow state, I'd go do an audio gig all weekend, right? And then I'd make music in the studio, and then I'd like go to this other job, and then I'd have to switch gears. And for me, it was hard to like feel healthy, to be honest, to like then have to switch back into that creative state when I went back to the venue on the weekends or things like that. So like I was like, how can I stay obviously in that flow state all week long while supplementing my life? Like you got to make money. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So it turned into, I think it switched when I got into more commercial audio. And a lot of people who are trying to get into this world, commercial audio is a really good way to practice your chops, to like kind of work with gear, to work with other professionals, because we're talking about audio that's done for conferences, audio that's talking heads, audio for hotels or after parties or things like that, where it's not necessarily a venue, it's not necessarily a band or music, but you're using the same tools. You're using microphones, XLRs, cables, you're plugging into consoles, you're recording things, it's that same world. So that actually, there's so much of that work, especially here in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
Where like, I was able to then supplement my weekdays with like those kinds of gigs and then still do my, studio throughout that, producing just music in the studio, writing music. And then on the weekend doing the venues, still getting to mix the bands and doing that kind of stuff. So that kind of helped me step away from like doing kind of more like jobs that are outside of that creative space. And then once that happened, and people started to realize, oh, Max is doing this all the time, then it started to like attract towards me, to be honest. Like, I felt like it was a big push to like say, okay, I'm done doing things that are outside of what I want to be doing in this world of music, of audio, of creativity. And you know what? There was a time where I didn't have enough money, because right in that transition period where like, maybe that week I didn't get a lot of gigs and it was tough and I was like definitely trying to figure it out. Luckily, I had parents that supported me, and helped me, in that time, I mean, they were still like, putting me in an uncomfortable position to figure it out, to chase it, to not, to be determined, but like enough to where like, I feel I had somewhat of a safety net. They live here, so I never thought I was going to like end up on the street or something, which was helpful in my situation. I know not everyone's situation is like that, but, definitely taking the leap or having the faith in yourself or the belief in yourself to take that leap, I think is the key. It's going to be uncomfortable maybe for a second. And also just like word of advice, business talk real quick, like never get out of a job until you have a new job. That's just base level. So like I'm a planner. I'm always like thinking like ahead, so I was always like, even though maybe some weeks were hard, I was still always looking for that next thing. I was using like Indeed, like my Instagram feed. I was like looking at gigs, even if gigs were like kind of not exactly what I was doing, as long as they were in audio or music or something. Absolutely. That kept me again in that flow state where I didn't have to leave that creative headspace. I was all for it. I was down. And then, pre-COVID, I think like right before COVID happened, I was, the venues got bigger. The gigs got bigger, as I'm doing it more, I'm getting better at my craft, the studio word got out, before COVID, 2019, I had like 15, studio clients and I was working at a venue, managing, the club, hiring engineers and working 6 nights a week, mixing live music.
Dang, that's really awesome, man.
So it was like 2 years of that, wow. But it was like a good like 10-year, maybe even 12, 13-year climb to then like 2018, 2019 being like, wow, I'm mixing live music at like a club, that's got nice equipment with really, big studio musicians coming by or like bigger artists, doing that 6 nights a week. And then like, I'd literally go from the studio, in the morning, I'd do like a session from like 9 a.m. to like, 2 or 3. I'd go grab food and then I'd go to the club and then I'd go set up for sound check, go through that whole thing, do the show. And then maybe I'd go home, but some nights someone would book me out for midnight back at the studio. I'd go back to the studio and grind it out till like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and then rinse and repeat. And so there was a time where I was like running it, like, and I was hungry, I was starving for it, so sleep wasn't my top priority. It was trying to make sure that people knew that I took this seriously.
Absolutely.
And so that kind of, to be honest, I forgot our question, but I kind of like went into this story of like, kind of how it kind of got to that point. It was perseverance. It was dedication. It was being hungry for it. It was also, I think, one of the most important things that makes me kind of emotional too. was being open to learning about my craft from people who were better than me. Because it's really easy to kind of like get swept up in like, well, this is my style, and being creative, you know, doing art is like kind of like, you know, it's an opinionated based, you know, thing, you know, people can like something and other people can like something else, you know, so it's opinion based, you know, so being able to like meet some of my mentors who took me into that next realm of like learning how to make things sound better, learning how to make people forget that there's a technical side to it when it's live, you know, learning different, you know, tricks and tips of how to curate not only my own signature sound live, but also in the studio, and writing, and how to make records sound a specific way that brings the attention to the listener. And I mean, there's a whole long list of things I could get into, but it was just being open, really open, you know. I feel very, you know, thankful. I'm very thankful, very blessed, very emotionally open to, you know, bring happiness not only to others, but, you know, I'm trying to, you know, have it go both ways. When I'm feeling happy in the studio, you can tell. When you're at a concert that I'm mixing, you can always find me dancing at front of house when all is going well. I mean, and there's always like when sound check starts, you know, or sorry, when the start of the show starts, you know, there's always like, you know, that one song, two song where like, okay, yeah, I'm figuring things out, you know, like
Absolutely.
the crowd again changes the acoustics of the room. You know, the band almost every time is playing louder, more powerful than they were in soundcheck. No matter how much you try and get them to like, okay, play the loudest you're going to play in soundcheck, live will always be different. Like they're always going to come with adrenaline. They're going to show up with the vibe, you know? And
I mean, once you see that audience, I'm sure like I would be like, oh my God, this is so real.
But for me, things change though on a technical level. So the first song, maybe two, I'm dialing it in. I'm listening. I'm seeing how the crowd reacts. You know, you know, the band on stage or the artist is giving me changes because now they're singing louder. So now things are coming at them louder,
Right.
you know? So there's definitely adjustments in the beginning of the show, but then I always relate it to like flying a plane. Mm-hmm. It's like you're waiting on the tarmac. Okay. And then like the show starting is like, you know, like you're on the runway, kind of like pushing the gas, and then you're like lifting off. And then it's always like that cruise from like, you know, the ground to like 30,000 feet where it's like, you know, it's a little bumpy and,
Absolutely.
you know, you're kind of getting up there. But then at a certain point, you kind of like level off, and then it's like clear skies and, you know, it's smooth. It feels, you know, like there's autopilot, and mixing a live show. I wouldn't say it's autopilot because you're still doing things live with the band. You're throwing effects out. You're making it better as you go along.
Right.
But at a certain point, there's also magic in like, yeah, it's good. Like, don't touch anything else, just like ride stuff. And that's like you've reached 30,000 feet. And I'll always like with my teams, like, especially at bigger shows where there's a stage crew and there's like a bigger team, I'll be like, guys, we've reached 30,000 feet.
Oh, I love that.
And once I say that, everyone kind of relaxes because it's like, oh, like everything's going good right now. You know, it's all chilling. So yeah, that's a little bit of just like the full scope of like how I kind of like got to that point of like, now I'm, you know, working at these places that I dreamt of working at. And, you know, it's completely changed my life. It's changed the lives of people around me. And I love to share that energy. I love to get, you know, people to come out to the shows and to, you know, kind of dream, you know, more.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I mean, for me, I feel like what you said about cruising and like taking off the plane, I feel like that's kind of the same experience for people going to the concert, first couple of songs, you know, get into the group. But when you're actually like enjoying that concert, nothing really matters anymore except the music, who you're with, not even who you're with, like who you're seeing. You know, it's a lot of fun. So it's really interesting to see that even your musical journey, or even as a producer, it's a process. You have to stay patient and diligent and hardworking. So it's really cool to see that whole time span into one little interview where I get to know all that. So you're obviously in the studio all the time. You're always at these concerts, and you're very involved within the music industry. What would you say is something that you would want to change about how that industry goes, or what goes on with the people who are involved in it.
I wish social media was less of a part of the industry.
I feel that.
I feel like my Instagram at first was like, hey, look at like these cool consoles that I'm working with. Look at these cool artists that I'm working with. And now it feels like I use it as like a business tool.
Yeah.
Where like, I think it's great that like, you know, I'm able to share, you know, that view from the front of house or from behind the console, or, you know, the shot that I always love is like when mid-show where there's a sea of heads, you know, a sea of people, and then the band right there. That's my favorite shot.
I love seeing that.
That's my favorite
it's
shot.
Amazing.
When people are, you know, you see the hands in the air and things like that. That's my favorite shot to capture. But I almost like these days feel obligated, and I mean, I like to do it, you know, and I like to capture it because I know that I also know that people like to see that perspective of it. And it also kind of drums up business for me too. You know, people see that I'm doing this with so-and-so. They see that I'm doing this consistently, and they go, you know, I like to say like, what's the best way to stay at the forefront of everyone's mind that I do this? And that to me is the easiest portal to allow myself to show people, hey, I'm doing this consistently. Hey, if you need, you know, these types of services, or, you know, someone to, you know, bring that type of technical magic in the studio or live to your production, your music or something like that, you know, when they think about, oh, who can I get to help me with this process? I feel like I try and stay at the front of their mind by posting consistently, by showing, you know, where I'm at all the time and things like that. You know, and a big part of what I love to do is artist development as well, you know? And so seeing an artist, you know, who maybe just followed me from seeing one of my shows, or got like, you know, pulled from one of those performances that I was mixing or whatever, you know, for them to then see my story, you know, and consistently be like, wow, like Max is, because a lot of people who meet me live don't know that like Maxim Adams is my solo artist project. They don't know that I play in a band called Deep Fried Dynamite, you know? And so they think, oh, I just mix music live, you know, and I just work with bands live. And so my Instagram kind of helps me show my audience that, okay, I do live, and I also do studio. I also write music. I also release music myself, you know? And I feel like, again, going back to that core thing, like it was all to allow for myself to have the freedom to make my own music. That was, again, the original dream. Because once I kind of gave up on like, I don't want to necessarily be the person on the stage all the time, you know, and I play with the band, you know, once in a while we book gigs, you know, we maybe do 2 shows a year, you know, or I'll do like DJ events for my solo stuff or whatever. But like at the end of the day, it was always about just like, I want to be able to make the music and have the freedom to make the music, you know, not feel like I have to, you know, be somewhere else or something like that. So I just really feel like my Instagram feed, as helpful as it is in keeping my flow state going, you know, I also wish that it was a smaller part of the industry. You know, I wish that people were talking more to each other. I wish people were meeting outside of the show more often, you know, and so like for example, we're talking about, you know, all of these things right now, and we had met, you know, at a concert, literally right, but also we've been staying in touch via Instagram.
Right.
And I wish that instead of staying in touch via Instagram, we were seeing each other more at concerts, more at musical meetups, more at, you know, conferences, or, you know, music meetups or gatherings where people are just there to do exactly what I'm doing on Instagram, which is promote myself and promote, you know, what I'm doing. I wish there was more opportunities where we can meet in person to do that, you know, and kind of take, because, you know, as much as you see the hands up in the air and things like that, you see a lot of phones too, you know, capturing video, capturing their own Instagram stories, which again, I think it's great. You know, it's such a fantastic tool to be able to promote yourself, to be able to stay in contact with one another. I'm not saying I don't want it. I'm just saying I wish it was a little less of a big part of the industry, because now if you don't have X amount of followers, if you don't have, you know, this level of clout on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, first of all, if you care about getting into a label, that's not happening if you don't have a certain number. Already, it doesn't even matter what your music sounds like. Doesn't matter if you have the best voice. Like, it's sad. Like, people who run the industry in that way, you know, they care about numbers, they care about the bottom line, they care about the return on their investment, you know, and that's kind of like the part that people don't like to talk about, you know, about the industry, is that there is this bottom line that, you know, business people are trying to make, and that they have to incorporate the artistic people, the creatives, into that number. How are we going to make that number? And the bottom line is not an opinion-based number.
It's just like numbers on Instagram.
It's a physical number that isn't judged by opinion, you know, like art is, you know. So I just feel like they're so close together, and I wish they were just a little more separated. Not non-existent. I love Instagram. I love being able to share my experiences with, you know, people who weren't at the show, you know, like I have a lot of people who couldn't make the show that night, or who had other arrangements, but they could still get a taste of like that show, you know, from my feed, because I capture it and I still make a point to get that, you know, and I just wish it was, like I said, just slightly less having to do with each other and more based on, like, you know, reps and A&R people and things like that. They shouldn't pick the next biggest artist based on their, you know, follower account or like things like that. They should pick them by coming out to shows based on recommendations, you know, from either their network, you know, artists that they know, things like that, and show up to the scene where you know, art is being made, where music is being performed, and make judgments based on that. There's so many artists that I've worked with and worked for that, again, like even myself, don't have the biggest following.
I feel like that's kind of the beauty of small venues, is because the majority of the bands that I love and listen to now is like I saw them opening for a band that I was going to go see, or they were recommended to me on Spotify through random little things. So the beauty of small venues, or smaller venues, not like these huge Kia Forum shows, is that you get to discover artists, and, you know, or you'll find people in the audience who are like, damn, I love this band, but have you heard of this one? And this huge spread of music and artists that you really love. So I agree with you there that, you know, Instagram can sometimes be so exhausting. It's cool because you can find different bands, or you can find really cool producers, or you can find people who make music. But at the same time, you know, as a journalist too, you're kind of expected to post every single time you make an article. Make sure it's really good. It's eye-catching. It gets exhausting because you're like, okay, do people really want to like read my work or listen to what I do, or just look at what I post on the internet? It's so exhausting. And
that's part of why I took the dream out of having Maxim Adams be this huge musician, you know, famous musician or whatever, and just kind of made it as this network of where I could just release my music and have this archive of music that builds. And I don't really care if it gets 1 view or a bajillion views. All I care about is that, again, I have the freedom to be able to release that music in the artistic way that I want. And that I'm able to work with my friends. I'm able to work with people that I love, that inspire me to make better music. And, you know, just being able to like focus on that exact thing, like what you actually wrote in your articles, you know, focus on the content that's inside the content, you know, not just the surface layer of the picture and then the small description, but click the link and then read the full article and understand a little bit more about the things that you think you understand, you know. Having said that, you can follow me at Maxim Adams, Maxim Adams with 3 S's at the end.
Well, but as we end this episode, is there something that you want to shout out? Is there a person, your Instagram page? Are there other projects that you want the listeners to know about?
Connect with me on my Instagram. That would be great. Come to the show. Come to the front of house. I know that the front of the stage is the best place to be, but also where the sound guy is also a really good place to be.
I'd have to agree.
Come say hi, don't feel so, because I feel like there's been this kind of like imagery of like this angry sound person, like guy who's like disgruntled and kind of behind the console and blah, 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 blah. And
you're definitely not that.
I'm definitely trying to change that, that stereotype by being someone who wants to talk. And I love talking about gear. I love talking about what I do. I like talking about sound and how it affects a performance so much. And come hang out with your local audio people, and your production people. I think a lot of times it's a thankless job, because at the end of the day everyone's clapping towards the band, and everyone's, and I think the thing that makes me feel good about it being a thankless job is the thanks is when people leave it going like, wow, like when people are blown away, and they don't know where they are.
It's definitely happened. It's 100% happened before. We're like, oh my God, that was the best night of my entire life.
Like a night that people will remember for their whole lives. Mm-hmm. That's the things that I'm looking for. That's the reason that I'm doing it, not for the clap. I'm doing it because I want people to remember that moment. I want people to feel inspired. I'm a huge advocate for curating inspiration within your network, but then pushing it outside of your network to new people, new friends. Again, like you did that exact thing that I just said I wish was happening more, where you just came up to me and you said hi and you said, let's talk about what just happened, and now I know that's what, you're trying to create for your own, industry and things like that. But like people who aren't trying to be journalists and people who aren't trying to capture like that on paper should still be that way, though. I feel like it should go for
everyone. Yeah,
it should go for everyone.
You meet the coolest people in the most random ways. You have the best experiences by chance, so definitely go out there.
And also, you never know, like that person could be that person who becomes your mentor or helps you, figure out that next stage of like what you're trying to do. A lot of my mentors I met while doing a gig. Either I had mixed them or I had worked with them or, something like that. I met them in the field, not like just randomly. Like, you have to put this is a famous quote I will say from my father, who's said this my whole life. It's not about being in the right place at the right time, but it's about putting yourself in enough places so many times to where one of those times will be the right time.
I absolutely love that quote.
And so, being able to do that and, just come out to the shows, come say hi. I'm trying to work with more people in the studio. I'm trying to, create music, not live as well. Shout out to all of my family and friends, for helping inspire me to keep going. It's a lot of late nights, sometimes early mornings, it's stretches of I'll do like, this year I'll probably end up doing 300 plus shows in the year.
I love that.
And so it is a lot of work, but just seeing people be excited and being happy, that's like why I love to do it and what makes me keep going.
It sounds like you're doing wonderful. I know you're doing wonderful things. I see it all the time. But it's been really great getting to know, a little bit more of the behind the scenes of the behind the scenes that we don't see.
Behind the sceneception.
Ooh, I like that a lot, actually. Behind the sceneception, where, I encourage everyone that I meet, hey, go to this show. It's $5 or it's $15. The most you'll spend $20. Let me tell you, best $20 you'll ever spend, like ever. It's awesome. So it's really encouraging to see that there are people who are truly passionate about music and, you know, connecting with each other and making a special moment for, you know, people who are trying to have some fun or also super into music. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I've learned so much, and I'm almost certain that our listeners will have too. So again, follow him on Instagram. It'll be included on the screen right now. Woo! Definitely give him a follow and keep up to date on really cool stuff that's happening. And again, if you have any questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them for you.
I love talking about audio, gear, music as a whole. I love meeting new people. I love just spreading the good energy and the good vibes and working on attracting those things closer to ourselves.
Absolutely. Guys, stay diligent, stay positive, talk to people, and go to concerts.
Health is wealth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So join us next episode on Artist Banter, episode 3. Love to see you soon. Listen to our podcast. Thank you very much.